This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network.
Welcome to The Anxious Voyage. If you think that title sounds bleak or foreboding, one of two things must be true. You're very lucky, or you need to get out more. On this program, we share stories of life and living. We compare notes. We discover commonalities. We accept that life is a glorious, heartbreaking thing, and we embrace and celebrate all of it. Take the ride with us. We're glad you're here. Now, here's your host, Mark O'Brien.
Hello and welcome indeed. We are coming to you again, and as always, from World Headquarters in Middletown, Connecticut. It was my routine custom to start every program with a rather stupid joke about Middletown, Connecticut, but today especially, this conversation is important enough that I don't really want to do that. I'm joined actually by three folks today. And I will introduce them rather formally. Sven Lauch is an accredited emotional logic coach. Melissa Hughes is a psychologist and neuroscientist. And Rabbi Yonason Goldson is a speaker, advisor, award-winning podcast host, and teacher of Jewish history and Holocaust studies at Esther Miller Bais, if I pronounce that correctly, Yaakov High School, Bais. Yaakov High School in St. Louis. Thank you for the correction. And thank you all for being here, very sincerely. Sven, I am going to start with you because we're here as the result of a LinkedIn thread you started on Holocaust Remembrance Day. And if you don't mind, I'm going to read you a little bit from the beginning of that thread. You posted a question from the BBC News. The question was, what was the nature of the moral collapse that turned this horror into a normality for the Nazis who ran these camps, a normality in which mass murder became for them all in a day's work, end quote. And then you went on to write, I believe questions like this are essential, yet they are rarely discussed in our history lessons or anywhere, really. Instead of exploring the dark and sometimes evil depths of our own hearts, we tend to point fingers at the past and declare, such must never happen again. As a German, I find that our desire to dissociate from our history also hinders our ability to change the future. Would you care to elaborate on that a little bit?
I can. It's something that has been with me probably for a few years now, the idea of how to learn from history. And for me, it's always been that we are very quickly pointing to a person or to just one event or to a specific system. But we're never asking how that system came about in the very first place. Where did it come from? Where did the information come from this actually was based on? So we don't really look into the philosophy in a wider scale, the knowledge of the time and things like this. And being a German, we've been hammered with Holocaust and the whole Nazi Germany and East Germany and the communist system. We've been taught about fascism year in, year out. This was a constant part of our education. And yet, looking at Germany today, you must wonder, after so much education, why do we have those problems? Why is anti-Semitism rising? Why are people still kind of there who seem to find ends in following these ideologies? And I think that's kind of where I'm trying to come from is, yes, as a German, the only way I learned history was by pointing the finger, this must never happen again. Without actually exploring, would I go there? Would I, as a person sitting in a room, go there? And I think that's kind of one of the things I really want to highlight. Do we confront our own hearts with the history, or do we just point at it and hopefully we'd never go there again?
Yonason, Early in the thread you wrote, this is precisely what makes Adolf Eichmann possibly the most frightening of all Nazi criminals. Quote, I was just doing my job. That's right, of course. That is essentially what he said. But I'm mindful of the fact that given the fact that he was tried so much later than his peers at Nuremberg, many of them said the same thing. What are we to make of that?
There's so many ways to go in this conversation. Hannah Arendt wrote a book about Eichmann called The Banality of Evil. And even if you don't read the book, the title says pretty much everything you need to know. The whole idea of disassociating from the emotional, from the moral, this is a job. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm instructed to do. The Stanford prison experiment, where dividing students up into guards and prisoners, and almost instantaneously they self-selected themselves into those roles, and just conformed to what in their own minds were expectations. It's really quite terrifying how quickly human beings can default to what they believe or are made to believe they should be doing. I hope we'll come back to the underpinnings of Nazi ideology, how many of the doctors and academics in Germany during the rise of Hitler were not only supportive, but enthusiastic. They were convinced that they were on the side of good. They were convinced that there was a moral imperative to do what they were doing. It's not just that they rationalized evil. They actually were enthusiastic because they had come to believe that this was the right way to act. And there's nothing more dangerous than a true believer.
Melissa, I made a comment in the thread that you called me out on, and I want to come back to that in a moment. But given your education and what, sorry, I'm being notified that somebody's microphone is causing feedback. I don't know how that's possible. Given your training as a psychologist and given what Yonason said about the Stanford experiment, which was supposed to have lasted 5 days but only lasted 2, what do you make of that? And what do you make of our propensity to fall into those roles so readily or easily, I suppose?
I don't think that I completely understand your question. Could you rephrase that, Mark?
Yes. When I looked into the Stanford experiment, understood that it was supposed to last for 5 days, found out that it only lasted 2 because so many people completely freaked out as a result of falling into their ostensible roles. I was stunned. So psychologically, I don't know what to make of that.
Well, I think a couple things. I mean, if you're not familiar with this Stanford experiment, it's frightening. I mean, it's so frightening how easily we can slip into those roles. And I think part of that is it's a mental safeguard, because it's not really my fault. I'm not actually being mean to these people. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is my role in this situation. And I think we humans have a propensity to want to do what is expected of us. And these folks went into this experiment with a certain expectation. And so they all wanted to live up to that expectation. and this sounds crazy to say, but do the right thing. And so the jailers, in their quest to live up to their expectations, became miserable people. and it had to stop because no one actually was able to stand up and say, wait, this isn't right. This is not who we are. And they just kept going. And so the reason it was stopped was because it was clearly getting out of hand.
And the fact that the people in the roles of guards got so out of hand so quickly obviously shocked me. But also the people who were in the roles of prisoners. I actually was expecting them to not take it seriously. And they did. Are we that susceptible?
I mean, if you look back in history, I mean, that's an experiment. But yeah, I would say we are. I mean, if you look at the Holocaust, there were good people who participated in horrible things, right? And there were people that knew that there were horrible things happening that did what they were told, even knowing that it was going to end badly for them. And they did what they were told, either out of subservience or fear for many of them, or I have no choice. What can I do? I'm powerless against the system. And I think where Sven's article spoke to me and coming in on Holocaust remembrance was especially significant because given the rise of anti-Semitism and the whole never again is, the never again mantra is really just a tagline if you are going to share Holocaust jokes and if you're going to take examples of anti-Semitism lightly and just kind of, it's not a big deal. Well, then never again means nothing, because never again means we have to look back and say, what were those little things that got us to the big thing? Because the Holocaust didn't start at Auschwitz. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that there are people that are really grappling with that, not just with the Holocaust, but just in general in our society today. I think people are afraid or exhausted to speak up. And, when there's something that is important to them happening, injustices against other human beings, I think people are either exhausted with conversations that matter, regardless of the political spectrum that you sit. There are people who really need to participate who either aren't willing to consider another point of view, or they aren't interested in having that conversation, or the people who are super passionate about it are so frustrated and angry and hurt that the delivery is so not conducive to a meaningful dialogue. And I say that because I have been on both sides. And I think we all have, depending on the topic, right? So I think that, Sven's point, his article was just kind of a subset of kind of what we're seeing across the board, I think, in our divisive society right now.
Can I jump in with the something about psychology?
Please do.
Solomon Asch did an experiment many years ago in perception. They put 3 lines up on the board on one side, a line on the other side, and they asked people to identify which of those 3 lines was the same as the single line. And really, there's a whole room of people, but only one of them was actually a subject. The rest were all Confederates. And so each person in turn said what was obviously the wrong answer, until it got to the subject, who was somewhere in the middle of the room. And I think it was close to 80% of the time, if I remember correctly, that the subject said what everybody else said. He knew it was B, but everybody else was saying C, so he said C. Well, the principal I taught for many years was, he did his graduate work in psychology with one of Solomon Asch's students who was part of this project. And he learned that when they debriefed the subjects, they asked them, why did you say the wrong answer? Well, many of them said what we'd expect. Everybody else was saying the same thing, and I thought maybe I didn't understand the instructions. I thought maybe I was doing something wrong. I was embarrassed to be different. But some of them said, I kept looking, trying to understand why people were answering the way they did, and I saw the line actually become the same as the other one. And this is absolutely terrifying. It means that if there's enough external pressure, our perception of reality will change to fit what we are told it should be. And once we reach that point, we are in serious trouble.
Sven, earlier when Melissa was talking, I saw you nodding your head. Do you recall what you wanted to share there?
I mean, I was nodding lots of times, but there's one story, and it actually happened in the American high school in California. I think it was in 1967. Looked up. It's called The Third Wave. If you have never heard about it, you have to read that small book. It's very tiny. But it's an amazing story where a history teacher struggled to explain to his high school students how people could believe that all these things never happened. How could he explain people just went with it and believed it? So he created an experiment and did 3 small rules. I can't recall them all, but one of them was to unify them so there's some uniform. Just his classroom. It just started in his classroom, their uniforms. He made them all the same, so they were all supporting each other. So he created a culture in his classroom where we're all the same, where there's no higher and lower, there's no more intelligent and less intelligent. It was all bringing them all under the same thing, which created a culture that every student in the classroom loved. And it spreaded like wildfire throughout the whole school in days, to the point where they knew they have to break this apart somehow because it had complete control. And it had not even been the teacher himself trying to create a school-wide thing. It just happened in an American high school. So, we might think we live in a free world and this would never happen here. It actually happened in 1967 in a small school with the intent to teach that how susceptible we are. And they had to really help those students to psychologically recover, because this whole thing became a trauma for most of those people, because they suddenly realized how quickly they actually moved with something without realizing where it led. And I think that's, that brings also what Yonason said earlier. It's not just the thing of kind of getting put on more standard. It's the passion of truly believing this is the right thing to do that also can actually take us go further. When we stop actually going in our own compass, like, is this still 100% right? We just see it's like, oh no, 60% right. I just go with it, and I think that all these experiments, but in this case, it wasn't an experiment. It was not scientific. It just happened in a school by a teacher trying to educate students, and that's the danger I think we need to see. It's not just somebody trying to manipulate. This is it's our own heart that so quickly just walks with it without us realizing.
I want to be mindful that we have a break coming up in a few minutes, but the questions going through my mind are just almost more than I can keep up with. Yonason and Melissa, you have both been teachers, and given what Sven was just saying, do I, as someone who was not a teacher, underestimate peer pressure? You said you used the expression moral imperative, Yonason, and I'm trying to see the correlation between peer pressure and what may evolve to be a moral imperative. Is that psychologically plausible?
Well, there are so many elements in the rise of Nazi ideology. I mean, in some ways, you have to go back to Charlemagne and the French Revolution, the American Revolution, and the Franco-Prussian War, and the 30 Years' War. I mean, there's this it's absolutely fascinating, and it's way beyond our scope here. But this sort of inertia, this historical, cultural inertia that created the circumstances in Germany that allowed Hitler to capitalize on that. He created a national mythology of how they were descended from the great Nordic master race, which was represented by the Roman Empire and by the Greek Empire. And they had a moral duty to perpetuate the master race. They drew on Darwinian philosophy, survival of the fittest. They saw that the Christian idea of helping the poor and the sick was a perversion of natural law. If you go back to the ancient Greeks, they would take deformed babies and take them out in the fields and leave them to die of exposure, because why would you want to allow this imperfect being to become part of your society? You blend that with the victimology. I mean, it's fascinating. I don't want to pontificate, but how do they mesh that with this idea that their nation had been destroyed in the aftermath of World War I? Well, it was because there was a virus. There was a virus that invaded the healthy body of the German people, and that virus has to be purged from within, and then it has to be protected against from without. Well, the message was one of, we are truly great, we have a destiny, there's an infection that's trying to destroy us, there's a conspiracy that's contrary to everything that we are trying to do for the world, and we need to take collective responsibility for restoring ourselves to where we can fulfill our mission for the benefit of humanity. I mean, it's an awfully compelling narrative, especially to a nation that has been humiliated and broken, and in our own minds, and to some degree legitimately victimized by the rest of the world.
I'm sorry. I had my microphone off. I didn't realize that. I'm sorry. We are going to take our first break here. We will be back in 3 minutes, so we will see you then. Sorry about that.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brands, distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com, or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to dreamvision7radio.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
I'm not hearing you.
I'm sorry. Welcome back. I'm having microphone issues. I want to try to connect a few things that were going on in the conversation as well as in the earlier thread. Melissa, at one point in the thread, you wrote, moral disengagement also describes the normalization of the atrocities like the Holocaust, as well as much of what we see today, albeit at much smaller scale. This psychological concept describes how people can detach and normalize bad behavior by justifying it, minimizing its harm, or blaming others as the cause. I think that connects to what Yonason was just saying. And I had attempted to rephrase the BBC question that Sven started the thread with by saying, what were the conditions, threats, and risks that contributed to the turning of horror into normality for the Nazis? And then I do not condone or minimize the atrocities of the Nazis, but I can't reduce their having been committed to anything less than their full text. You called me out by calling that a psychological sidestep, which it clearly is. But that leaves me not knowing how, especially when something is happening at that cultural scale. And given the example that Sven cited in that high school, how do we resist that psychological sidestep?
I think we make it personal. I remember after the Kanye West thing that happened, I guess we're going on 3 years now, that Kanye West made those horrible statements, and there was outcry that he had every right to do that because we live in a society of free speech and he should be able to do that. And I remember watching a special, it was one of the Sunday morning shows, and the journalist had gone into an LA high school and spoke to Jewish high school students following that and asked them questions like, have you seen anti-Semitism in your high school? And they were all like, yeah. Have you? And they were all, it opened my eyes because I guess I, at that point, did not realize just how pervasive it was. But one of the kids made a comment that, and this was a television show that was 3 years ago, and I still remember this girl's face and the tone of voice that she used when she said, these kids that are making jokes about using a Sharpie marker and writing a swastika on my locker or on my arm or on my book, and laughing about Kanye West's comments. To them, the Holocaust is a topic in world history. To me, it's what happened to my grandmother and my grandfather and my uncle and my aunt. And it's why, 3/4 of my family is not here. And even when I say that today, I get a little bit choked up because I think that is it. I think we have to make it personal, and we can't. I'm not Jewish. I didn't lose anyone in the Holocaust that I know of in my family, but I know someone very dear to me that did lost his family in the Holocaust. And so I think until we can make it personal, it will be just a topic. And today we're talking about the Holocaust, but it could be anything. It could be, pick a hot button topic out there. I think the other thing what made Sven's article so meaningful to me is that there are people who are saying, hey, wait a minute, that's not okay. Like, it's not okay. We'll take Kanye. It's not okay to do that, Kanye. And there's this whole group of people that's saying, yes, it is. It's just a song. He's allowed. It's free speech. Like, we live in America. And that normalizes it. And when I hear that and I don't raise my hand and say, hey, you know what? No, that's not okay. Then I'm normalizing it too. My silence makes me complicit. And I think we're in this battlefield right now where people are loud and hateful and silent and complicit. And it feels like those are the only two places that we can be right now. And so when Sven's article came across, it was right after the Elon Musk expression of love, should I say? I mean, and to me, I say, you can't say, respectfully, Mark, you can't say, I don't condone or minimize the atrocities of the Nazis, and then also say, but anyone who really sees that as a Nazi salute is really an idiot, really a libtard, really a snowflake. Those two things cannot exist, because if you think they can exist, then no conversation, no meaningful dialogue can ever exist. And that is when never again is a tagline.
Gentlemen, given what Melissa just said, I'm thinking about a line that's blurring. What are the roles of ignorance and insensitivity that play into what we're here discussing?
Well, I mean, certainly. Go ahead, Sven.
Yeah. For me, I mean, one of the things why I wrote this article was actually challenge the idea of free speech without morals. Free speech, it's that's how I understand it. It seems to be the first amendment in the United States. It seems like the foundation of everything, or has become kind of talked up like it's the foundation of everything. This is what we stand on. And I felt like we can stand on free speech. We should all have a free opinion. Don't get me wrong. I think we all have to have our opinion. We all have to discern the world the way we do. But we can't just use insults. We can't just talk, insulting, hurting each other. That's free speech without morals. And I find that that is difficult, because that's where it all becomes personal. Because that's the personal question I have asked myself. Why do I actually have to talk like this? Why do I feel I have to force my opinion through? This is for me, I think, where your question also goes, is why do I think I have to force it through? Why can't I just stand stable on my 2 feet, share my opinion, share my perspective, share my view, and let other people do the same without feeling attacked? The dialogue falls apart when free speech becomes a defensive attacking of each other. We should use the connection to our own hearts. And I strongly believe, from my own work as well, that we all have that inner compass. We all value life. We know that killing someone isn't right. We don't want to be killed. We don't know how. But as soon as we have suddenly opinions, we call each other enemies. We are calling each other, you shouldn't be in my life. And I had a moment in my life where I suddenly realized, just this thought that I don't want you to be in my life, what I'm really trying to share with here is you have no right to live, from my perspective. And self-reflection, I think, is so often missing. We don't reflect so deeply with ourselves, realizing that my rejection of others has far more waves that go with it, and if we follow through where it leads. And that, for me, has become personal. That's what I try to raise the awareness of. We have to look into our own hearts and reflect. What I'm willing to do to, for my freedom. Did this with young people once. Said, what is freedom? Well, I want to do what I want. I said, okay. What do you do when somebody restricts your freedom? What about punch them in the face? One of the 12 said. And it's that self-reflection that is missing. And that's, for me, so important. We need to stand on morals. We have them written inside of us. We all know that. But we're willing to discard them if we kind of feel attacked and feel we have to defend something. That's often just perception.
I just want to say this before we go to break. First of all, I'm appreciating the way all of you are compelling me to think differently. And on the subject of ignorance and insensitivity, I would defend your right to free speech, even if it offends me, because I think it's up to me to decide if I'm offended or not. But by the same token, I have no desire to be ignorant or enough to offend anyone. And I, for whatever this is worth, I think I need to think about the way I think about free speech. So with that, we will take our second commercial break. Yes, I've remembered to leave my microphone on, and we will be back after 3 minutes for our third and final segment. See you then.
Want Age?
Humanity's next step in evolution?
Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you to the extraordinary platform of evolutionary voices for the quantum age.
Let's explore. Learn more about this upcoming age where we bridge science with spirituality.
Where potentiality meets reality.
Where we take compassion into action.
Our trailblazers and visionaries will ask the whys, the what ifs, while igniting continuous possibility.
Come along with us into an age beyond what we know today, where we can grow together in unity consciousness.
Experience evolutionary voices for the quantum age, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on DreamVision7Radio.com.
You can't establish your brand's authority without a voice. That's why, since 2004, O'Brien Communications Group, OCG, has been helping companies establish their authority, find their brands, distinct voices, and position their brands effectively and persuasively. So effectively that 9 of OCG's clients have been acquired by other companies. OCG's business model emphasizes efficiency and results, not hourly billing, markups, and media commissions. That ensures OCG's advice is unbiased and its clients aren't at financial risk. If you're ready to find your voice and use it to tell your story, OCG is ready to help. You can find O'Brien Communications Group on the web at o'briencg.com. That's OBRIENCG.com or call 860-944-9022.
Calling all authors. Have you been considering an audiobook? Well, look no further. Come take advantage of Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's unique in-house audiobook production, which includes benefits and bonuses from our radio station. Let our knowledgeable staff guide you to create the audiobook you've always dreamed of without breaking the bank. Check out our full one-stop service from A to Z, including the ACX process. Schedule a free consultation by calling 508-226-1723. That's 508-226-1723. Or go to DreamVision7Radio.com.
Everybody has a story. Everyone's story deserves to be told, and the only bad stories are the ones we don't share. That's why Mark O'Brien created The Anxious Voyage. It's Mark's conviction that every story deserves to be shared, and his purpose is to give people in all walks of life from any circumstances a chance to tell their stories. The Anxious Voyage is now on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Please tune in, please join Mark, and please share your stories.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Hello and welcome back. I was thinking about your comment earlier, Yonason, when you said, we're not going to get to everything in the short time that we have. But I was trying to connect a bunch of the things that we've just been talking about, and we were talking about what can be done about this, and Melissa said we have to personalize it, and I was also connecting that to peer pressure and the way the experiment that Sven cited just sort of spread. And I also have to connect that in some way to courage and conviction. So yes, to Melissa's point, we absolutely have to personalize that. We have, each of us has to make it that mission. But how can that become, I don't know whether I should say well-known, accepted, or contagious enough to start to have influence?
I think there are two elements that I see here. One goes to your question about sensitivity. There are Jews who see anti-Semitism everywhere. And I think that in many ways they do a disservice. It becomes like the boy who cries wolf. There's a difference between people who are clumsy, people who are clueless, people who are awkward, people who are just insensitive, and people who are truly hateful. I got thinking Melissa, you mentioned the Elon Musk raising his arm. Years ago, my kids had we had the digital Jeopardy game, and they recorded Alex Trebek in all of these responses. And at one point, he raises his hand like this, and one of my kids said, "Was that a Nazi salute?" I really don't believe Alex Trebek had that in mind. As opposed to Elon Musk, I have no idea, and I really don't care. I didn't see the videos because still pictures can put things in contexts. I've got no dog in the fight with him. I'm not an admirer. I'm not a hater. But I think that some things we should let pass so we can focus on the things that are really substantive. And that we may not all agree on where that line is, but trying to make the issues, and this is not just about anti-Semitism, this is about everything. Who was it? The football player who didn't have his hand over his heart for the Star Spangled Banner. I think we turn so many non-issues into issues that after a while the issues just get lost in the confusion. But the other thing is that, Melissa, you said, how can I not speak up? And I think that really, it goes hand in hand with that same observation. There are times we have to speak up. I, in my work online, on LinkedIn, I generally stay away from politics just because it's so incendiary that you lose half the people right away. And I'm a moderate, so I lose everybody right away. But after October 7th, I felt like I had to start using my platform. And I did. And I was very gratified by, and I think I counted somewhere around 100 responses I got from people in my network who thanked me for helping them understand what was going on. And that was because I had cultivated relationships with people over years, and they trusted me. They trusted my judgment. They trusted my sincerity. And they believed what I said because we had that relationship. And when we work on relationships with people, that's when we have the opportunity to get them to hear our point of view. There's some people we're never going to reach. And we may be wasting our time if we try. Sometimes we have to engage those people because there are going to be others who are listening or watching, and they need to hear that we have an articulate response to what irrational people are saying. But again, a lot of it just comes down to picking our battles and not always fighting, but simply developing ourselves as voices of reason, so that when the time comes when someone needs to speak up, not only can we speak up and will we speak up, but we can have others listen to us and we can have influence over them.
I was going to wait to see if Melissa or Sven had anything to add there. I think what I would say in response to that, Yonason, is if everything's important, nothing's important. But when we get to that point, then we lose sight of consequences or repercussions, because not everything has the same consequences or repercussions. So I think that reinforces your point that you didn't use this terminology, but we do have to pick our battles, and we do have to make discernment about what's important and what's not.
Can I jump in, Mark?
Please do.
I can completely concur. And I think I know people in my network, in my circle of trusted, very smart, deep thinkers, and I know what's important to them. And I would never poke them with a joke or mock something that was truly important to them. And so I think, just in response to, if everything's important, nothing's important, there are people where if that thing is important to them, then it has to be important to me enough to respect that it's important to them. We don't have to agree. I don't have to assume the same position as that person on that particular issue, but I have to respect that that is an important position for them to take. As it relates to the Holocaust, Elie Wiesel, we must always take sides. Like, this is one of those, we must always take sides. And he said, neutrality never helps the oppressor. Never helps the victim. It always helps the oppressor. And I think the point that I was trying to make in my comments on that thread was, if we cannot, as a baseline, just agree that the Holocaust should not be the source of mockery or jokes or humor, then we're cooked. We're just done, because never again means nothing. If we can't just agree that that is off limits for jokes and humor and that kind of thing. So I agree with Yonason. I think people, everything is anti-Semitism. Everything is not anti-Semitism. However, if my neighbor says that's anti-Semitism and it hurts me because it makes me think of my mom, then it's anti-Semitism. And who am I to say that it's not? I think that's the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and I will just say that what flashed through my head, Yonason, when you likened it to crying wolf, was that's just so enormous and so horrific and so painful. It's hard to dismiss when people say things are anti-Semitic, because what happens if you let it go? That's a tough one.
Yeah, but there's also the gauging the level of response. Yeah, if you say to somebody, there was a case, I've talked about this a number of times. There was a case in rural Missouri where I live, the Missouri part, not the rural part, where there was a mayor of a small town, and he was at a meeting and he was explaining a contract about garbage trucks and what they had paid, and he said, we just didn't want to Jew them down. Which, if you're old enough to remember what that means, and he caught flack for it, understandably, and he was contrite. He was very, to my mind, sincerely apologetic. He had never met a Jew in his life. He had picked up this language somewhere in his youth, and he had no idea, the way that many of us, when we were young, used the term "you gyp somebody," without having any concept of where it came from or what the connotations were. Well, now we've come to a point where we recognize that's not a proper thing to say. He apologized. And he sounded very sincere. But there were all these attacks upon him from various corners, accusing him of anti-Semitism. And that's where I think there's a degree of nuance in at least our response, to recognize that when a person says something like this, first let's find out, let's evaluate the situation, find out where it came from, address it in a civil way, and see how they respond. Well, if they double down or they persist, then you've got an anti-Semitism problem. If not, it has to do with cultural. Harry Truman, who was a great friend of the Jews, was my childhood hero. They found his private diaries a few years ago, and they found he had made anti-Semitic remarks in his diaries. Well, he made some other racist remarks because he grew up in Missouri in the turn of the century, and that's the way people talked and thought. And the fact that he didn't uproot all of that from himself okay, I think actions speak louder than words. You know, he was the first one to implement civil rights legislation. I think we can be a little understanding that he wasn't able to completely purge himself of all of the racist influences that formed him who he was, and focus on all the good he did, and if not completely excuse, at least understand where those other elements came from.
So I'm still struggling with the insensitivity ignorance thing, because once you know, then you can't claim ignorance anymore. And if you persist, then you're seriously being insensitive. And Sven, I actually want to leave the last word to you, but I just want to share this story. When we were kids, we didn't know any better, and we were starting to learn about, Germany and the Nazis and all this stuff. I can remember that we made these armbands, black armbands with swastikas on them. There was a family who lived across the street. The man and his wife had both grown up in Germany. At least the man had come here at a young enough age that he served in the American Army in World War II. And he just very gently called me aside and said, listen, here's why what you're doing is so wrong. And I think because of the way he presented it to me, despite the fact that I was so young, that absolutely sunk in. And so I couldn't claim ignorance on that one anymore. And yes, please.
Can I just, so Mark, I think what you just said is like the foundation of all of this, and where I am, and so many people I think are so frustrated and struggling right now, because he didn't come over to you and say, you stupid little whatever. Nope. He didn't call you a name. He didn't tell you were just dumb and what are you thinking? And he didn't do any of those things. Nope. And you were receptive to understand his perspective. And I think what happens today is all the names that are being tossed around, for somebody that has a different point of view because of a different political persuasion or whatever, it shuts down the conversation. It's over. It's just over. I'm not going to listen. You are not going to listen to anything I say if I come at you and call you a right-wing, whatever. You're just not going to listen to me. And the conversation's done. And so, I mean, I think that is a big part of where we find ourselves right now.
Agreed. Sven, we have 1 minute. Would you like to close it out for us?
I mean, that was just beautiful. And that's kind of where I try to come from, is the moral compass. If the moral compass, then I have understanding of curiosity. I'm actually asking questions rather than judging and name calling. I ask questions, where does it come from? Why do you believe that? And really actually try to see the person behind what was said and what was rather than judging the person for that external side. And that's, I think, what our moral compass helps us, this dialogue that comes with curiosity first. Like, why do you believe this? Where do you have that information from? Have you considered this information? If we can't talk this, this is exactly what Melissa just said. Name calling stops the conversation right in its tracks.
Agreed. I'm sorry this has to end right now. I thank all three of you. You've taught me much. I'm not surprised. And actually, as I think about this conversation, when we're finished and we get the recording, I reserve the right to have you come back, because I think this has, as we say in the marketing biz, legs. So I hope you will do that. And I thank you again. And I thank everyone else who tuned in today and who will watch the recording. I will be back a week from today with another show. Thank you all.
Thank you for tuning into The Anxious Voyage, the program dedicated to sharing stories, helping people, and celebrating life. You can see and listen to The Anxious Voyage on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network every Monday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with live broadcast every first and third Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you have a story to tell, or if you know someone who does, please email the host, Mark O'Brien, at mark@o'briencg.com. In the meantime, please remember, the only bad stories are the ones we don't share.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.